Good
Good
morning,
afternoon.
good morning, Professor
Morning.
Porter.
Morning.
Yeah.
We don't usually meet in the mornings, but
No.
anyway, what's on my mind this week is problems of leadership from Abe to Zuma.
Hmm.
If you think of all the different leadership issues that have been in the news recently, it really is quite amazing. Even the leaders that we think of as being very good, like Macron, for example, everybody was so happy that he was elected, and he seemed to be excellent to begin with. It
Hmm.
now is having serious problems with leadership. And I think that this is really has a lot to do with globalization. We've talked before about organization, the fact that the larger the number of people and the larger the number of people in particular, not so much in existence, but who need to be part of a political organization and accept a form of leadership, the old models don't work so well. And we had a similar problem like this, I remember, at a much earlier stage of my life in the middle of the last century, after being very happy with a number of European prime ministers like Adenauer and de Gaulle. Well, we weren't exactly happy with de Gaulle, but he certainly was a leader.
Yes.
But at that time, we weren't looking at the world as a whole. Now we look at the world as a whole, and all just under 200 countries, and you start making a list of the leaders you've heard of, and almost all of them are leaders you've heard of because there's been some problem.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that the leadership qualities that are required today have internal national roles, responsibilities equal now to outward-facing international responsibilities. There's just no two ways around it. This has happened in really a few short decades, but it's definitely here now. And if you get somebody who's determined to do what, for example, the American president seems to do, is link the American foreign policy very blatantly and nakedly with America's self-economic interest, it's a very discordant note.
And it's going to be very difficult to do anything about this because in each country it involves changing procedures, which are, in fact, for very good reasons, the most difficult procedures to change.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that? The most difficult procedures to change?
Well, because the American Constitution.
Oh, okay. I see. All right, that way. Yes, indeed. Yeah.
I was thinking about this as we were approaching the time that we were going to meet, and so I wrote down Abe, Duterte, Kirchner, Macron, Maduro, MBS, Mohammed ibn Salman, who's causing all sorts of problems, and thinks he can do absolutely anything he wants to. Merkel is having problems. Modi, Morales. Then there's Nawaz Sharif in Pakistan. Netanyahu is a real pain. Park in South Korea. Putin, of course, everybody's talking about. Sheikh Hasina in Bangladesh. Aung San Suu Kyi in Myanmar, who nobody can understand what's going on there.
No.
The next one, of course, is Trump, but we won't say anything about him. Xi, who is made himself president for life, and Zuma, and of course now Lula.
Yes, yeah. Well, he's in jail now.
Yeah. Did he actually go to jail yesterday? Oh.
I read this morning that he did surrender.
Oh.
So.
I haven't looked at the news yet.
But you go through this list of leaders. That's essentially the universe. That's everybody. It would have been easier. It would have been easier to look at leaders that are not in difficulty. And I couldn't necessarily name one.
It's difficult. I mean, I was trying to remember the name of the Prime Minister of Poland because he's been in trouble recently. Uh, uh,
Well,
and then, of course,
but all right, so if we looked at it and recognize that all leaders are facing are in difficulty, then what does that mean then from a globalization perspective?
well, I think it draws attention to the fact that the as you start having to deal with larger and larger numbers of people, the old models of leadership don't work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, think of there's also Indonesia. I've talked about Saudi Arabia already, but Afghanistan is having terrible problems.
Mm-hmm.
Iran has a very good model, even though it's very unpopular in this country, but it's a very good new model of leadership. But they're beginning to have serious problems.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess the realization that the people at the top have is the same that the people below them have, i.e., that you can be connected to the whole world, but the people at the top now have to recognize that these outside effects and outside influences are actually really affecting the relationship they have with the people who appointed them or elected them. There's no two
Well,
ways around it.
I also think that it's a bigger problem than that. It's not only the qualifications and experience of the people who get elected. Mm-hmm. It's that there's a big difference in the way they're being elected, even though the model is the same. The participation and opinion formation in the election process has changed.
Oh.
So, there's much more participation in the whole of the electorate in talking about who's going to get elected now than there used to be. Mm-hmm. The society used to be organized in such a way that people at one end paid attention to what people at the other end said and didn't make up their own minds. Now everybody's making up their own minds. And so I think that finding a way to solve the problem is going to be much more difficult than it has been in the past. I think it's simply another aspect of this problem that we keep coming back to, that the larger the number of people you have to organize, the bigger the problem of organization. And the models of organization that we've had for the last 2 centuries, as through the colonial period and the period of the growth of democracy, mm-hmm. Are not working anymore. We know that nation states are beginning to fail, and there's been more and more getting written about the problems of nation states, especially because so many parts of the world were suddenly told they were nation states and they hadn't had any history of being done. So we just have bigger and bigger problems of organization as globalization progresses.
You know, you made an interesting observation when you were talking about how globalization has essentially empowered, to use your analogy, the electorate A to Z to get involved in the electoral process, whereas in the past it might have just been a subset that made that quote unquote choice, and the balance of the group followed along. And you begin to pick that up, at least in the West, in an early warning sign by the way advertisers on television, for example, begin to reorient their message to make sure that they're reaching that 30 or 40% who did not participate in the past. And then now this 30 or 40% is very, very much the swing vote in the European elections, the British exit election, the American presidential election. So what has to happen is we or whomever, pick your pronoun, has to figure out a way to communicate with this group, and to communicate with this group in a way that's respectful and is not emotional and almost xenophobic, the way they've been being reached so far. All right. And this is going to be the big challenge, because they now have a seat at the table as a result of globalization. The question is, okay, now what are we going to do that this uninvited guest has arrived, that everybody should have foreseen would come, but are we going to try to wrap our arms around this person and bring them into the group and educate them? And I know I'm using a couple of different metaphors here, or analogies, I should say, but this is a big problem.
Is it going to be Facebook or Cambridge Analytica?
That's exactly right. I mean, are we going to try to exploit this person and try to pick them apart to try to get what we need out of them? Or are we going to say, all right, listen, good, we're glad you're here. Here, why don't we? It's a dilemma, because you and I have talked about this. I don't like that guest at the table. I am very offended by that guest. Nevertheless, I understand that guest is at the table and he or she isn't going away. So we have to figure out a way to contact and communicate with each other.
And the other thing that we should include in this discussion is that the ways of communicating have changed so much. Facebook is now, over 10 years old, and then there's all the other social media, and enormous amounts of money in play here. I just realized that Facebook has bought WhatsApp for, I don't know, $1 billion, and then other types of what should I say, mechanisms for communicating larger and larger numbers of people and trying to influence them, like Cambridge Analytica. These are all completely new, and nobody's quite ready for them. I mean, even though they've been discovered and used, we're not yet dealing with a universe that includes all these things.
Correct. Far from it. But the game plan involved with these acquisitions is, I think, to try to ensure that they're going to be able to communicate with the whole population that's resident on their application. I mean, they want to make sure that they get there first, where we're talking about trying to how to communicate with that 30 or 40% that's now at our table. I mean, they're trying to learn how to do that.
And probably the next problem is going to be language.
That's true too. Yeah, but it may not be, Professor Spooner, because there are ways to communicate now with emoticons and all these various other things, and Google Translator. I mean, it may not be as much of a hindrance to this younger group than we traditionally would think.
No, but it's a factor that influences who gets involved in what.
Okay.
That is what I meant. Because it's amazing now how much English has spread in different countries. I think I've said before that I get emails and visits from people who've never been out of China before, never been out of Iran before, and they speak perfect English. It's absolutely amazing the way these things have changed. And of course, since I haven't been traveling so much recently, I'm not aware of how much other languages are also spreading, but I imagine that the same thing is happening to some other languages. I imagine, for example, many more non-Chinese native speakers are learning Chinese now than they used to, but I don't really know. Whether Russian is still expanding or not, I don't know. In fact, the other thing is that all the way each of the languages is being used is also changing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So people are expressing themselves in different ways, saying different things. And I think that even though we have people who do study this sort of language use, they're not studying it from a political point of view and understanding, doing any sort of comparative analysis of the way political ideas and ideas about leadership, which after all, leadership is the most important part of organization, being able to communicate the basic ideas about how everything should work and carry the population with you, is essential for the way a global community is going to be organized. And it has to be done through language. In a way that people will participate and be interested and be carried along. So we're really getting into deeper and deeper into the real problems of globalization, I think.
Well, we probably should leave it there before we get into that next area. But that was very interesting, Professor. Thank you very much, and we'll look forward to speaking next week.